5 or 6 minutes slow.
It's 5 o'clock now.
If you look at your agenda, we're going to do a little change in the agenda because of the challenge of being efficient tonight, getting through everything. And we have 2 guests with us, Greg Curtis and Brian Allen. So guys, come on up and grab a seat.
Pleasure to be here.
Christine should be here in a minute.
Food smells good.
So we'll let her. So for legislative update, we'll turn it over to you. I have 4 or 5 questions, but I'll let you do your summary real quickly, and then I'll have a few questions, and others might.
Well, just from a policy standpoint, we were tracking a little over 200 bills that could impact the city, which is a little bit more than normal. We had a lot of new legislators. Obviously, they all have constituents that talk to them about things, and some of them, you know, it takes a session or 2 to understand the balance between local control and state control. And we educated a few on that. So just some of the highlights, and I wanted to get through a few of these. So there was a nighttime highway construction noise amendment bill that we had some concern about because of the gravel pit. That bill got amended. We worked with the sponsor and with the league and came up with some good compromise language, I think, that allowed the city to continue to do what it needs to do to regulate and mitigate any issues related to the operation of the pit. But
I feel like we have concerns from the old mill area, so that's...
Yeah, and that would be the area that would have the challenge. So that was a positive, I think. I will say that this year, more so than any years in sessions past, I saw a lot of bills related to clean air. So the legislature is finally getting around to doing something around that. And so a number of those bills passed that we thought were important. One of the ones that didn't quite get us the response that we'd hoped was the vehicle idling amendments. Patrice Aaron was really worked hard on that bill and really wanted to just make it a local control issue. But what did happen though is the state reduced the number of warnings that the person can get before they actually get cited. So you've got a little bit more teeth in the enforcement of that.
It was 3 before?
It was 3 before, now it's down to 1. So that was a step at least in the right direction. But she did get it to the point where it was like fully locally controlled. Another highlight was the Stenquist bill on local boards of council structure. It would change the form of government. We worked with Representative Stenquist. He was great to work with. He had a perspective, and it was valid, I think, in the instance that he was talking about. However, in our regard, it would have just disrupted what we're doing as a city that I think is very positive and that our citizens like. And so he saw, I think, ultimately the wisdom and the arguments on both sides of that and decided that doing nothing was probably better than running a bill at this point in time. I think he's still committed to trying to fix the problem he's trying to fix, but I'm not sure exactly how we'll go about doing that. So we may see a bill again on that issue. The towing revisions by Representative Malloy, I know that one had a lot of restrictions on how the cities could manage a towing program. And I've worked with Corey, talked to them a lot. The league worked with Corey, talked to them a lot. He ultimately stripped out all the stuff that impacted the cities, and the bill passed I think in a place that's good for us and good for the towing community. There was a bill on unlawful outdoor advertising by Representative Musselman, and that bill did pass. It doesn't impact what we're doing as a city, fortunately. It did initially, but it got revised, and that was helpful. The critical infrastructure materials by Logan Wild, that was a bill dealing with gravel pits. And again, another one of great concern for gravel pit owners, great concern for the cities.
Especially Draper.
Yeah. What ultimately happened with that bill is it just ended up kind of extending a moratorium that's been in place for a little while to give more time for the 2 sides to come together. So it basically allows the gravel pit to expand into an area that it already has zoning rights to do, and they already own the property, but they can't during this moratorium, they can't go out and try to seek a zoning change or acquire new property. So that was a compromise bill. The other bill, the Container Regulation Act, which had to do with plastic grocery bags and whether or not a local entity could regulate those. And we went back and forth with Representative McKell on that, and he was a good sport about it. But we ultimately were able to keep that bill defeated, so the local jurisdictions still have the opportunity to regulate those if they decide they want to. There was a bill by Representative Daw dealing with the development advertising amendments. Apparently, there were developers in Utah County that were buying property and then allowing signs to go up to advertise for development and a whole lot of other things. And then the development never happened, so it just became sort of a de facto get around the sign law option that some were taking advantage of. So he fixed that. That was something that we didn't impact what we were doing. The amusement ride, I know Ann Eschel has some real concerns about that, and we worked with the sponsor on that bill. Representative Potter was great to talk to. He understood the concerns and ultimately made changes that we felt were necessary, and that bill passed in its amended form that I think everybody that deals with the amusement ride industry and all the cities, fair and everybody that deals with amusement ride issues were comfortable with. The Community Renewable Energy Act, and this relates directly to the resolution our city passed to deal with renewable energy. This bill was hard fought, to be quite honest with you. It was a heavy lift. We spent a lot of time on this particular bill. It was important for us, so I think, to meet the goals that the city had when they passed the resolution to get the bill passed. And it was one that it was hard for people to understand. When I first talked to the sponsor, he had a hard time explaining the bill himself. He was just learning it and trying to explain it to legislators was challenging, but we got them to understand it, and that bill passed in a way that I think made sense. The food truck amendment bill, we worked with the sponsor on that as well as the league, and that one seemed to turn out in a good place. So that one still allows some local control on the food trucks, but it allows for reciprocal licensing, so they don't have to get a permit every place they decide to drive the truck to. And then the Utah Communications Authority Amendment, this is the 911 structure, and that bill was actually quite controversial, and that passed. Tier 2 retirement passed, and I think in a fairly decent place. It will ultimately cost entities money. I think the first year is being funded by the legislature, but next year the cities and the counties are going to have to figure out how to pay for that. So that's one of the challenging ones. There was a code enforcement bill by Senator Thatcher that initially started out to be quite problematic, but after numerous discussions with him, he revised the bill, and the bill passed, but it ultimately didn't change existing law. It kind of made a statement for him, for the constituent he was working on, but it didn't really change anything for us. It ended up being actually probably a good thing in the end. So those are kind of the highlights. I don't know if you have any specific questions.
Yeah, I have a few, and then people can add to it. Affordable housing, sales tax, and of course, maybe Greg can talk about the UDOT transportation.
Well, affordable housing, there was a lot of talk about affordable housing. There was a little bit of work done. There wasn't a lot of money set aside for affordable housing or for homelessness beyond what's been done in the last couple of years. There wasn't any new money this year for that. So still an issue, I think, that everyone's wrestling with, trying to figure out what the best solutions are. And I think the challenge that everyone has, and the legislators I talk to, is we can make housing affordable at a beginning point, but how do you keep it affordable long term? Because ultimately it inflates in value and everything else happens, and it really becomes challenging.
Senate Bill 34 that talked about we're required to update our plan by a certain time, and then we have to have 3 of a list of 23 items included. Am I understanding that right?
Yeah, that bill.
That's Senator Andrick's bill.
Yeah.
That's Andrick's bill, yeah. So I've got that one here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that bill did pass.
Yeah.
If I could pull it up here. Well, my link isn't working, but yeah, there were some things in that bill, and I know the league worked really hard on that bill, and we provided a little bit minor support, but I think it got to a fairly decent place, and I'll get some particulars on it, get it to you, and let you know what you need to do.
And there's enough of the list of items that I think we can address that.
Yeah, and I think that's what we felt.
The menu is, yeah, they made it.
It was a pretty big menu, and I think you had to hit a number of the items on the menu, and it was fairly simple to get to, I thought, when I looked at it, and I think the league felt comfortable with it when we finally got to a place on it that was a place of happiness, I guess.
It's a little easier for some cities to get there than others, right?
Well, I think that's true.
Sales tax?
Well, sales tax, I mean, that issue, they punted on it, at least for now. There's supposed to be a working group coming together to work on it. I know the league is trying to get involved in it. We'll obviously be monitoring it. It's a concern. We don't know where they're going to head on it. I don't think they are actually very sure on it right now. I mean, the initial bill was they were going to tax everything, and the latest word I've got, and I talked to a legislator that's working on it in a couple of weeks ago, and it sounds like they're going to be a little more surgical in how they do it and less broad. And I'm not sure how that's going to look. We're still waiting to hear on that, and they obviously know it's going to impact cities. They're aware of that. They want to be able to get some analysis done to see what the impact is on a city-by-city and jurisdiction-to-jurisdiction basis.
Like if they start requiring a sales tax of a plumber and he comes from Midvale, but he provides a
There
service in
are,
Colorado.
yeah, and there are a lot of unanswered questions, because it's like, is it where the plumber's office is located that the taxes, or is every job in the jurisdiction of every job that they do, which would be a nightmare for a small business to try to keep track of, and it would be a nightmare for anybody trying to audit it to make sure it was actually complied with. So it'll be, they know that those issues are out there, and they've had those conversations. It's definitely something that will keep a lot of us busy.
What we're hearing, and we hope is the case, is that when they have the stakeholders group that meet in the special session or whatever, that municipalities will have a seat at that table to talk about the
So they're going to have
consequences and unintended consequences that impact us.
Yeah, the working group, the idea of the working group is to bring stakeholders together to really talk through the issues and have something that is a consensus bill when it goes to a special session. I don't think the government can call a special session on a bill that there's a lot of controversy on. I just don't see that happening. So if there is a special session, and I'm heard they're really targeting the fall for that, then that would be when it happens. So we'll have several months to work on the details of it, but it's going to take a lot of analysis, and I'm not even sure if they can get a lot of the information they really need to understand it. I don't know. I mean, I think the tax commission may have an idea of some things, but up until about the middle of the legislative session, from what I understand, nobody had even talked to the tax commission about the potential consequences or what day-to-day action might have to help score the thing and see how it impacts the city. So it'll be interesting to see, what's actually out there and available from a data standpoint.
Suppose that they want to hold the cities harmless, but
well, yeah, I don't know. I mean, there was one amendment to the bill that was running this last session that just exempted the cities out and just dealt with the state's portion of the sales tax. So I'm not even sure if that even makes sense from a management standpoint ultimately, but I think there's probably a need to broaden the base. How you do it is a trickier question.
But the challenge with that exempting it out is there is long-term consequences. There's growth and things that would impact us, and I think
Yeah,
the league
because
talked a lot about that.
if you follow the state, the revenue trend for retail goods, the sales tax just is really shrinking, but the service base is growing, and so they think that's where the growth is. So there's some good reasoning behind what they want to do. I think it was just sort of the timing and the process they went through to introduce the concept was a little bit bulky at best. So I think there's some challenges there.
then before we open up, let's just go right to one of the most important things to us, and that is, Greg, with the $13 million to UDOT and transportation and background behind that.
It got funded, so you probably don't want to know all the dirty details, and probably wouldn't share them with you anyway in a public meeting for sure. You saw Mayor Wilson's article probably in the newspaper expressing her, wanting to do some, getting some immediate relief in the canyons. A couple, I don't remember, 2 or 3 legislative sessions ago, they have the canyon, the funding for the Little Cotton Canyon, about $65–70 million. They're doing the NEPA studies, environmental studies. That seems to always take a long time. The 2018 session, there was money funded for $500,000 for a parking facility study, and then 10 to 15 million for parking facilities. UDOT's still studying that, and then there's 13 million, and that's has to run through UDOT. And so I'm thinking my grandkids will be driving in 6 or 7 years, and maybe they'll have an option. I don't know. I'm just there is a heck of a lot of money that goes into studying issues. Sometimes somebody just needs to, you know, step up and make a decision. And you're not. I don't care where you do it. Someone's going to complain. Whatever you do, just decide what you think is best and go forward. But you'll have as much, you know, I mean, impact with UDOT as, you know, as anybody. Just keeping their feet to the fire in the Cottonwood Canyons, the Central Wasatch Commission, you know, and UDOT's trying to be very cognizant of that group and cognizant of the membership and the environmental groups and other things, and that has its own difficulties or challenges, I should say. And so anyway, it is funded, you know, so that's the nice part, and hopefully meaningful conversations have started with.
Well, I think it's no secret that that's critical to us, because we feel one of the cornerstones of finding answers for Central Wasatch and Wasatch Boulevard is that transportation hub of some sort with the mountain, Big Cottonwood Canyon somewhere. And so,
Well, and that
hats off to you, and we applaud your efforts, because that's a huge step forward for us. Of course, we've communicated with Senator Cottonwood as well.
Yeah, no, and he was instrumental, you know, in working with Senate leadership, and you know, so yeah, that's a good thing. I mean, the money's there, and then the frustration being is just the lag time, you know, and I understand. There needs to be a process, and they're working through that. So.
Well, I had talked to Mayor Wilson before that passed, and encouraged her support. She, I think, was going to communicate with you as well.
Right, met with her multiple times in regards to that, and you know, yeah. So it was overall, it was that was good, you know, and we did there's good and bad. You probably saw there was $12 million worth of little one-time quarter funding, and in those discussions, you know, Cottonwood Heights was brought up and discussed, but it was, you know, you're getting 13 million. We said, well, that's going to UDOT, and they're like, you're getting 13 million, you know, just leave it alone, you know. And so those are some of the discussions that were had with.
I think the key point you just made is that, you know, we have study after study after study. The study sits on the shelf. I think what's different now, both with not just with the 13, with the 65 and the other little pots, there's actually money to do some. That's what's frustrating, is why we just don't start finding ways to make something happen.
Well,
I think UDOT's getting the message a little bit.
I think they are, and I heard a number that shocked me. I mean, when they talked about parking facility, and they said that they thought that they needed to have somewhere akin to 5,000 stalls, and I'm like,
That's a big number.
that's a
It's $150 million.
yeah.
Right, 3,000 a parking stall.
Yeah,
Well,
that may be the right number.
yeah.
A lot of cars go up those canyons.
You know,
You got commuter traffic going downtown.
UDOT, but you know, UDOT says $30 million a stall. I mean, I know there's a lot of private contractors that just choke at that number, but
Thinking it's too low.
high.
Oh, too
Too
high.
high. I mean, but anyway, but depending upon your siting, grading, structure, I mean, you know,
Land
aesthetics,
acquisition.
land acquisition, I mean, but you're in the ballpark between $20 and $30 million a stall, so. And I doubt that you would put all 5,000 stalls in one location. That would just be insane. But, you know, something over on that south end, but this money here is directed, and everyone understands for negotiation, so hopefully they're able to make something like that work. And that's
Yeah, one of
great.
the UDOT reports says on the busiest day, when they have 8,000 cars go up in Cottonwood, you've got under 5,000 parking places. So you've got probably over 2,000 cars who don't have a place to go.
And one of the realities is as they go up the canyon, we're able to move, patrons or users into mass transit. They have to have a better system. I mean, if you use the buses, one of the things for skiing, one of the things you find out is standing in line, have a bus pull up and say, well, it's full, and then you stand there for another 10 minutes, another bus pulls up, and you might go through a cycle of 2 or 3, and about that time you say, okay, I'm driving up here. Okay, so they're working through that,
Yeah.
but it's good. So that was good, and I want to give kudos to Brian because he did a great job. I'm not what I would call a handout, educate
That's
the
why
ma-
we have, that's why we have this.
the
team.
masses sort of people, and Brian did a great job of that. I just look at what lever needs to be pulled and just focus on pulling that lever, and that's, so we
Well, like we
make a
said,
good
And
team.
he's the man that knows where the levers are, there's no doubt about that.
Well, when you talk about 200 goes or tracking, we need both, and
Yeah.
hopefully we've got the results.
But I think one thing I'd like to thank you both is, I feel like from my perspective, I had one ask of you. And to know that you did it in 1 year and it didn't take 3 or 4 years to have that go through, I mean, I was just like, just texting these two guys all night during the last few minutes of the session, just I could not believe it.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know that there are any 2 other lobbyists in the state that could have done what you did, so thank you.
Thanks.
We appreciate it.
Well, we've been a good team for a long time.
Yeah.
We started.
We sat by each other 25 years ago, so.
We've raised a lot of cane together, that's for sure.
Speaker Brown calling.
Oh, Mel.
What the hell are
We've had
you
a-
two
we've had a
clowns
long
doing
friendship.
down there? I said, all right, we must be doing something right. We got their
Yeah, we know it's a
attention.
challenge, and it takes a team to do it, so appreciate you being part of our team and making that happen. And, the others that helped as well, in the legislature that understand our dilemma up here, so we appreciate that very much. More questions or comments?
I have one comment on, I know that Brian was aware of it, but the issue we had last year with the truth in taxation, where we found out we only had 2 days to set our rate after we actually had our hearing. We were able to get that tweaked, and now cities will have until September 1st to make that decision, so that means we would be able to do it on a more regular schedule as
I
opposed to.
appreciate your effort on that, Scott. I know that you
I forgot to mention that.
worked with them directly on that.
Representative Spindler, once I explained it to him, he was like, yeah, you're right, that just doesn't make sense, it doesn't look right, so.
Mayor, can I say one thing on the taxes? Need to be cognizant, there's 2 areas of tax, and the league's fully aware of this, but they're trying to change the base overall, services versus that. But they also, if you'll recall, when they started, they talked strongly about changing the distribution formula, okay? And there were some early on discussions, and I think House leadership recognized when there was comments to the effect of, guys, you can't change the distribution formula until you know what you're distributing, okay? So you got to settle on the base question, but we don't want to lose sight of the issue that when they settle on the base question, some of the members of House leadership feel very passionately about the distribution question, and so they will move back to that.
I think that was the league's primary point when they raised some questions, was that point.
Yeah, and I mean, and it was, to some of, some of them didn't even fully understand those basics that much, it was some early on conversations saying, guys, you can't do them both together because you won't even be able to pick out who winners and losers are. And when they say hold harmless provisions are not a good thing. And the reason they're not is what they usually do is take a snapshot and say, okay, if your sales tax is X, then what we'll do is we'll guarantee you get X, or you get X plus 3% or something. So then you're stuck in a very, almost a small downward spiral versus having the natural growth that might come, through that. And so So.
Well, the conference of mayors, you're right, that, especially some of the west side cities really oppose that because they have a tremendous amount of growth happening.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you're told, if you know, hey, we're gonna guarantee you get X, but next year you have 7% more citizens and you have a 3% natural inflationary growth, but your sales tax only goes up 2%, you didn't hold harmless, you just stepped backwards, you know. And so, and the league's fully aware of that. I mean, Cameron's doing a great job, but will want to be anxiously engaged.
And that's why I have it on my list, because that, if you look at our revenue source, it's one of our two top revenue sources is our sales tax. So if that's tweaked in the wrong way, it could devastate a city like us.
Well, and they talked about wanting to do it towards what they call jobs. And, you know, if you have jobs, and Salt Lake City was just there salivating, going, hey, that's awesome. You know,
Yeah,
and
South Salt Lake would be
but I represent Salt Lake City, and I pointed out to him, I said, don't be naive, they'll find a way to take it where you don't get, they're not gonna let you come out of here a big winner. But there's a lot of, it's complicated, you know, formulas and messes up. And we'll be involved in that, I mean, as they move forward. You know.
It's not gonna be
Again,
an easy
we
task.
appreciate your efforts.
All right.
I had a
Move forward,
quick question for
please.
Brian.
Sure.
I heard that they might hold a special session to talk about banning convergent therapy on minors.
I have not heard that.
You have not heard that?
I honestly have not tracked that issue because it's not one that's relevant to any of my clients. I know that there was a lot, there's a lot of concern about it out there, and the bill that was running didn't go get where it needed to get to. And I know there's still some real anxiety about it out there amongst policymakers, but I haven't heard about a special session for that particular issue. It may be that if there is a special session called, they throw that on the mix if they get a consensus bill on it. But typically, special sessions aren't called unless there's agreement on the bill. So unless they get agreement on it, it's probably wouldn't happen. But
If you hear anything, let me know.
I will. I'll try to keep my ear open on that one. Okay.
I guess I have one more thing for Greg. I've been hearing that there may be some additional bonding that may occur for some canyon work as well, and I just wondered if the mayor could sit down with you and just talk about this and maybe talk about UDOT and EIS and how we might be able to influence that as best as we can for our communities.
Sure, love to. There was, the Senate passed in Senate Bill 268 a very large bond, you know, at $1.6 billion. You know, it's easy to be the first one that throws it out there because you can just throw whatever you want. Nobody believed it was going to be that big, but the House, you know, when they skinnied it way down. So they were already talking about being a bond next year. The question will be is what kind of influence we can have in where it's directed.
Well, and with that, the Central Wasatch Commission, in part of those two pots are doing the studies in two different canyons. One of the first things they're doing is they're looking at a whole menu of financing options. And we saw the first draft of that, and bonding is one of those. Also, the tolling is another one to use as a source to fund the bonds. But there's a myriad of things. But yeah, the first piece of that study is talking about financing mechanisms.
And I know Mayor Wilson in her conversations, the county has some funds they have starting July 1st of this year. The county will receive the .05, which is about.
We get a piece, they get a big piece.
They get, yeah, and most of the cities will get the .1, counties get the .05. The counties don't have .05 worth of B&C road needs. And the idea is, and I think the county recognizes this, that it'll be for regional type projects.
Including in that, what's nice is trails too.
Oh, absolutely. It's very broadly defined. It's so passive, active transportation, passive, you know, on trails. So the difficulty will be is Mayor Wilson is very focused on the canyons. And I think she'll have support with her caucus. We haven't necessarily convinced, you know, the west side that this is the most pressing transportation need in the valley. I mean, so there's a lot of pressure over on that side. I mean, Harriman likes to tout that the city, probably comparable to the size of Cottonwood Heights, maybe even a little larger population-wise now, likes to tout that they have absolutely 0 state roads in their city. Mountain View Corridor, which is a state road, is their eastern boundary. And they said everything, you know, and they say, so when people talk about demand and growth, we have it all, and so UDOT's, you know, and you saw a little article where they're all, I don't know if you saw it, they're all, they've all joined together and they're all getting together and putting money for studies and doing all that good stuff. So more studies. We're in the wrong business, I'm telling you. We should be studying transportation, okay? Not funding it, studying it, okay? Apparently, but anyway, so. But there are options, and so I'd love to sit down with you sometime.
So
I'll arrange it.
will you arrange that?
Yeah.
Because we have a deadline, I think, with our comments, right?
It's the 2nd of May, I believe. Yeah.
Which is
It's coming up.
Comments to,
for the EIS on Wasatch
Oh,
Boulevard.
okay.
And I think we want to be able to influence that towards our Wasatch Boulevard master plan, which is 4 lanes, one lane each direction for cars, and then a flex lane for buses, using that transit hub to push more buses through our community, because then it ends up in a 2-lane road that takes you to the canyon. So we've talked about this before, but I know the mayor and city manager Tim I just want to make sure that we're, you know, our citizens are going to make comments, but I feel like we should really be forceful with our comments, and I know that you'll be able to help us with that, given your relationship with UDOT.
Okay, any further questions of our guests? If not, thanks both of them once again, and we'll stay in touch through the year.
Thank you very much, appreciate it.
okay, thanks.
Have fun, enjoy the rest of your meeting.
Yeah, it'll be here for a while. Okay, focusing back on the agenda before we look at the meeting, the business meeting agenda. Back on the counter, the back is a big cake. It was brought to us tonight by a resident of, I guess, down in Greenfield Village area. Her name's Kathy Hawkins. I met her Saturday morning here at the Great Shakeout, and she brought 120, 130 stuffed animals for our first responders to use when they are in anything from a domestic violence or a house fire, anything like that, to give to the child that's in distress or something like that. I was just talking to her and met her before. She's done some other things in the community throughout our city. And anyway, she loves the city, loves what we do, and dropped that cake off to the council tonight. So I thought we just want to let you know where it came from. It's very unique. Once you get into it, it's well done. With that being said, the business meeting agenda is before you. We have, after the welcome and pledge, we have 2 acknowledgements, 2 proclamations. One is the Brighton High School Model United Nations team. I think they took first and state.
They're the only representative of Utah that went, and they won a part of the competition, which was on research, I
New
believe.
York. Okay, I think it says that, and I just didn't read that. Then the Brighton High School swim team, Coach Todd Etherington. I think the boys took state, and Todd got Coach of the Year.
Yeah.
It's
The
like
gr-
deja vu.
Girls, yes, it
Every
is.
year, right? We did the same
Yeah.
thing last
But
year.
it goes
Neither
back
one of
and
these
forth.
things-
The girls got-
This year was the boys, last year was the girls.
Oh, okay.
No, that was boys last year too, but the
Was it?
girls
Oh.
took 5th, and one of the girls set a state record. She'll be mentioned in the proclamation.
Oh, okay.
That's cool.
Yeah, all right. Anyway, that's exciting for our community for those recognitions. We have 4 action items. One is regarding our fireworks restrictions. If you know, over the last few years, 2 years ago, we had the tragic fire on the cemetery property. We then came back and modified where fireworks can be discharged, and we'll talk to that in a few minutes. We'll go through that, and then we'll, by our own, I don't know if it's state code or whatever, we need to set for map and parameters for this year by a certain date, May 1st. 4.2 is appointing our city manager as an alternate to VEC. And our representative is not there from the current appointment is Councilmember Shelton. Item 4.3 is declare a surplus. One of our five canine dogs we have, we have 4, so we're surplusing one of those. We want to talk about that. We'll go through that before the meeting, obviously. And then in the current budget, so as we're talking about, we plan on having a float in the Barbara Lake Parade, so it's a contract to design and build that float. With that being said, yeah.
We talk about that a little bit?
We are. We'll come back and talk about that, yeah.
But what are we talking about?
What are we talking about right now? I'm
Yeah, that'd
sorry,
be great.
Yeah.
I think I've expressed my concern about the float and the plastic, and
Mhm.
is there something we could do to influence the look and feel of that float, so it's not so like just throwaway and plasticky? I don't know.
Yeah.
So it just, it strikes me as not a great use of resources.
I know.
I know the vision for the float, but
Yeah,
it's just
okay.
something, can we do something so that it's not full of plastic?
Absolutely, do whatever we
Let's make it,
drive to do.
yeah, something that's recyclable.
The question will be the timing for this year, and I know next year is even a question if we're even having one.
Sure.
Yeah. But,
Are we starting from scratch, or is this a remake?
this is starting from scratch.
There's a picture.
It's a different theme this year. It's actually a veterans theme. We've had some veterans in the community that have communicated.
The desire to recognize veterans in their service, and I think the committee looked at it, and I don't know, Scott, if you were on
Mentioned them when I was.
there, but they talked about having that as the thing this year, is just recognizing the veterans in our community. But no, I conceptually agree that even that challenge,
And-
communicate that challenge.
Yeah, and I'll definitely communicate that. I'm not sure off the top of my head what the makeup of this is. I think there's some non-plastic paper products, but I'd have to, we'll have the conversation, yeah. In your packet, that's the image.
Okay.
But I know that if we're signing an agreement with Innovative Design Concepts of Utah, I don't know what their mindset is. Traditionally, they're used to designing something like they've done in the past, which is typically, if you look at remember the floats from last year, I thought they all had plastic. So I
Yeah,
just-
the train had a lot of wood on it too.
Maybe that would, but anyway, that was what, I know we don't want to spend a lot of time on it, I just would.
But I think if, hearing that concern, I think challenging the vendor to,
Well, let me ask one question. Is it, would the emphasis be on just avoiding plastic period, or making sure that whatever is used is recyclable? Does that make sense? Because it's like when we discussed electronic billboards, I was actually really surprised to find out that they're like 85 or 90% recyclable. That blew me away. I had no idea that that type of thing is that recyclable. It made me a lot more amenable to them. So that's, I'm just kind of, which is.
Yeah, I mean, if it was
what's-
like
what's
that, I
your-
mean, maybe we could put something on the back of the float that said that, you know, plastic here is like.
That would-
Yeah.
So, I mean, I just think an awareness, we could
but I
just be
think
aware.
if we
and
share,
where
yeah,
we
I
are.
think that's great. We share
Is
that
that, was
concern.
that, is it more the one or the other, or is it
Well, I mean, if we could use,
recyclable?
I mean, it's like the reduce, reuse,
Right,
recycle,
right.
right? It's like in that order, I think.
I think it's worth, sharing that with Ann and the committee, and as they work with the designer.
I don't think you'd run into any opposition, but
Well,
just
I
as long
think
as
that we should
it
applaud that.
stay within the,
Yeah.
Budget.
I think the public wants to see that, and,
I think it would be very popular.
Spending our money on trees, cover the float with trees and then replant them.
and I've seen that happen,
I think
actually.
it'd be fantastic.
Yeah. I remember when we switched from our old Christmas trees to I required my wife to buy a live tree so I could plant it in my yard.
Communication from Paula there, that this float is repurposed.
Yeah, it tries to reuse everything that is gonna use on this float, on different other floats that he's building for other people.
They rarely throw anything
Different-
away.
Yeah, they repurpose everything, so.
But
But we
with
can
that
emphasize
theme,
that.
I think let's
We can
challenge
emphasize.
them and get a report back. and-
But I mean, I like the concept, even if it's a, like, not rear license plate, or just a rear thing, something that
Yeah.
mentions that, I think goes a long way for making a statement.
Okay.
And that can't be,
We'll
I
do
expect
a-
the five of
we'll
us
do a
will come
report
up with
back.
$20 an hour to make that sign.
Towards that.
We could do that.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jim.
Okay, I forgot that one was not on the front, the others are. Okay. Any further questions on the business meeting agenda? Let's go back to staff reports, and before we jump into the budget, we had an interesting meeting this morning with UFA, and Tim talked about it a moment ago. I think all of us as council members and on the council, there's going to be a lot of questions coming up about flooding problems. Okay? And we got a report this morning, and Mike, you might want to share with us what was said, but it was from the county's hydrologist and flood control director. And I learned something that's really interesting. If you take a cubic foot of water, how much do you think it weighs? It weighs 63 pounds. If you take a 63-pound cube, put them all together, make it about 37 degrees, put velocity behind it, that would scare me if I had a kid nearby that. So I think one thing is we want to make really clear is try to stay away from the creeks, fundamentally. The second thing is just the flooding itself. And I know with what Matt's doing, about the sandbagging, we tweeted out some information today. The county has got plans, and the monitoring, I guess, is happening from like early morning until 2 or 3 a.m. on every creek. And we'll be getting those reports to our city, and then we'll collaborate between the two. But Mike, you want to add to that?
Yes,
it's your area of expertise.
Thank you. And water safety is the message that I submitted for the article as well. But we had Public Works from Salt Lake County and Waterworks folks at the meeting this morning. They gave a slide presentation, and they talked about the minimum and maximum cubic feet per second flows that the waterways can handle. And so for Big Cottonwood, the maximum is 775 cubic feet per second. For Little Cottonwood Canyon, it's 900 cubic feet per second. Once they get to 700 to 800 cubic feet per second, then there is possible flooding, especially in the lower areas of the waterways. And in 2011, this is really important, in 2011, and we are not to those snowpacks or water values yet, below those, we're kind of paralleling that line. Just depends on if we continue into this wet spring, right? But in 2011, when we had flooding issues, they never did get past bank full in Big or Little Cottonwood. What caused the water to get out of the banks is debris that was flowing through branches, trees, things like that, and then it clogs up like a bridge or a drain, and the water has no choice but to flow out. And we talked about this a little bit at a meeting, and I said the most important thing is to keep the debris out of the waterways, and this is the time to do that. They are flowing over on the Parley side rather high right now because they're starting to drain reservoirs. So they will not make a prediction as to whether or not we're going to have a flooding issue until we get to the middle of May. They always wait until that amount of time, and we're looking at June, right, if we start to see issues. But I'll remind you, what we want to see are warm days and then cool nights, right? In 2011, it stayed really cool, in fact cold all spring. First week of June, we had 90 to 94 degree temperatures, just like that. So the other thing that was interesting is if we have a warm day and then it cools off, we can lose 3 inches of water content just in that day, right? And that's why they don't say anything about this until the middle of May to see where we're going to be from the middle of May to the 1st of June, and you can just kind of calculate, you know, how much water can come off the mountain in 2 weeks, right? So right now, the hydrologist for the state is not of huge concern, although we are in different basins, and like the one that is relative to Big and Little Cottonwood Canyon, they're at 150 to 180% of normal. Now that we've been in successive drought years, and this doesn't fix that, but personally, I am liking seeing the water. I'm not liking seeing the wet spring though, because it grows the ladder fuels in the wildland and urban interface areas. As the mayor said, the cities will start to get weekly updates, that report from Salt Lake County, and we'll keep watching this. In the meantime, our logistics center is gearing up with pumps and sandbags and things like that to be prepared. We did have a presentation from our operations assistant, Chief Higgs, and he talked about our water rescue program. The key element here, though, is for folks just to not recreate near the waterways and keep an eye on your littles. And we're absolutely saying if someone, and this is hard, right, but you have to just stop the impulsive reactions. If somebody goes in the waterway, family member or not, I'm going to tell you not to jump in after them. More times than not, it just adds one more death to the total. You can't swim in this stuff, right? So these waterways are narrow, tight, rocky, very, very, very challenging. So our message is to stay away from them.
So today, we also posted on Facebook and Twitter about that, staying away from the waterways. We were contacted by KSL Radio. They interviewed me about that and about what we're trying to do to get that out. So just to make you aware of that.
And that's why I reemphasize it here, because I think we'll all have questions from our constituents, and they all need to understand that through our own emergency management, it's a concern of ours and a high priority to. We don't want to lose a single life, and obviously too, when we get down by 13th East, Little Cotton Creek, where there's potential flooding. Big Cottonwood, we went through it years ago. Hopefully, we mitigated most of those issues, but it can happen, with heavy flows. And, if you've ever stood by one of those creeks in this type of a flood time, you literally can hear the boulders just rolling down into the water because there's so much momentum and force. So it's pretty spooky. All right, thank you, Mike.
Thank you. Just
Please.
as a reminder, you want to, can we, maybe Tim, you can get the links. There's gauges that they have on each of those streams. You can actually go on the web and find out what the flows are. Those are still operational, I'm assuming.
Yeah, that's what we're using.
Maybe send us those links, because I know I've gone on there just when I'm online and look to see what the flows are and how they're behaving.
The county's going to be sending out a whole report.
Well, I know, but rather than wait the week, I like to come there maybe and then just see
Yeah,
how
yeah.
things have been affected. And the other one is that the mountains get progressively taller as you go south. So if you start seeing City Creek or Emigration, any of those start to have problems, then it kind of gives us a week or two before you see what happens in the top.
All right, we try and go fast, and I apologize, but we've got a lot going on. And if we can be through by 7, we won't have to come back, but there's a good chance we'll have to come back after this meeting for just a short period. But let's hold off on the budgets for a second so we can let that take us into our business meeting. So let's move to Tim, and you can talk about fireworks if that's all right.
Yeah,
Pretty quick.
sure. I'll be quick on this. We in your packet we've attached a report, a fireworks restriction zones report. We met with the fire marshal at Unified Fire and went through areas that we felt like we needed to expand our map. That's included in your report. It includes evaluation of state code and what they allow as far as the expansion of those areas. We've included areas along Cottonwood Creek, areas near Rustler Road on Sugarloaf Road that we've expanded. And one of the things that we've done is expand to define marks like roads. So it's not just somewhere up on the hill or something like that. It's a defined mark, and that's what we've done with these maps. There's areas near the slope hillside by McIntosh, and also the Giverny subdivision, some areas there that we've expanded. So what we are going to be, what you'll be considering tonight in the business meeting is adopting this map that we have to forward to the county by May 1st. That's why we're having this tonight. And like I said, we feel the expansion of these areas covers us even more on fire safety.
So what is this? Everything we had last year, and then where we had some of those vague areas that kind of ended like almost between a lot, we moved them out to the nearest street, and so we've expanded those. And of course, the same thing above Wasatch Boulevard, and along McIntosh, that side hill, which is Old Wasatch Boulevard, has been a critical one to add. So I think it's a good effort by staff and our partners with UFA. So
Thank you for getting this done so early. That's
it's
awesome.
critical to get it out, because then also this is posted. Fireworks cells is posted under those tents, so that the community is made well aware, and then it comes to enforcement, and that helps to have that. So,
And I have to give a kudos to our new GIS specialist, Melissa Blue. She put these together, met with myself, and she met with the fire marshal along with myself in that meeting, and we worked through this, so kudos to her for her good work.
yeah. Well, it's very clear to me. I went through it, and it was well outlined and very clear, which is a nice improvement. So, any questions on that? We'll be voting on that later on, but I think it's.
We'll get new signs put up, we'll be getting signs put out, I'm assuming that.
Yes, I believe so.
But no fireworks zone signs.
Yeah.
Did we go back to the emails from some of the concerned citizens last year that didn't make it into the maps?
A couple of those. One of the big one was on Macintosh.
Yeah,
That was a big one, which is new area on
Yeah.
that side hill. That's old Wasatch, where
Yeah.
you've got on top and below that whole hill there. A couple of them I think I've seen included here. Also by the cemetery, there was a piece that didn't go far enough out. And so we had that concern. We had that gentleman who had his house built and came and pushed that. I think they're there.
And around Bywater as well, there was some
That's the
questions.
one, yeah. But I think the other one that Scott just mentioned too is that we put signage up, like down the Old Mill Valley area. There's signage there, this area along Macintosh. So that sign is critical, and every year we do it, we get a couple of calls and say, well, I had a sign here last year, I didn't do this year. So it's having enough signs, and hopefully we save those and get them out, because that's critical. Yeah. We'll probably get some public comments when we get closer, and what are you doing, what is it, we'll have it ready, we can share it with them. I assume this will be on the website as well.
Mhm.
So people can refer to that. But I think we're ahead of the game this year, so I applaud staff.
It might help that, if I like to find space to print up a fairly good size one and stick on the lobby.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure
We'll
she
recommend
can
it
do
for the June and July newsletters.
Yeah, we use that too, wonderful. Yeah. Okay. Any further questions on that?
But if we, so we'll introduce it, people will make comment. If we hear comments before May, we can update it, correct? Or no, this is it?
This is what we're going to submit. I believe we have to submit it. There's still, if I recall, there's still allowance if we find additional areas between May and July to modify that.
Okay.
But we have to
That-
justify, it has to meet certain criteria. A neighborhood can't come, so I just don't want it in my neighborhood. It has to be, I can remember the definition, but it has to be within certain defined criteria.
And UFA wants them so that they can get them out to the vendors, so they have a
Well,
correct
that's why
map on
the
site.
state code gave us a timeline. We, as a city, to be honest with you, historically, we wanted to prohibit 100%. But the state slapped our hands when we did it last time. and
Because
this is the compromise.
I'm just looking at an email that from last June,
Uh-huh.
from a gentleman from 882 Grand Oak Drive. Sorry, I just prefer to get it right than just.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's, is that by Juvene? Is that out there?
So,
Or Wasatch?
all areas around is the east side of Wasatch, the west side of Danish Road, and the south side of Danish Road by the water treatment plant, and property south.
that's
Again,
all
Ward
we
Road,
had.
we got that?
That's-
Are all off limits to fireworks.
That's,
We are literally
yeah.
surrounded 300
That-
degrees right now
Yes.
fireworks.
That's
We
it
got
right there. That's the new area.
It's all been added. Yeah.
That's
But you're right, if you see something, we don't want to make mistakes, you know, all this stuff, but I think, when in doubt, we've added it. If you're really gonna say can't do it, yeah, if we're in doubt, we can just include it in the zone. Any further questions on that? If not, Scott, are you going to talk about the sale agreement for reassessing our, eliminating, get rid of our extra canine?
Yeah, so part of what, the dogs are considered an asset of the city.
Yeah.
And so part of making an asset available is that we have to declare the asset surplus. So I've talked to Chief Russo quite extensively on this. We currently have 4 canine handlers and dogs. Excuse me, one of those officers is Officer Ken Etchell, and he has taken another job and will not be working for us shortly, I think.
Correct.
And so it is not the plan of Chief Russo to reassign that dog to another handler. Sometimes there can be some issues reassigning a dog to another handler when it's partway through its career, if you will. The cost of the canines are between $4,000 and $7,000 up front. They're not inexpensive, plus there's training and so on and so forth. So if you figure an average of $5,500 for the cost of a canine, Ocho is now, which is the name of the dog, is now 4.5 years old. There's a working life of 6 to 7 years for a canine. So if you just did a straight line depreciation on that, it would leave the value of that dog at about maybe $1,965. If another agency were interested in the dog, they would need to take off some value for that to get the dog incorporated into their system and so on and so forth. So we're kind of saying, if you figure a 5-year-old dog basis, that would mean the dog would be worth about $1,571 on a straight line basis. I would recommend that we allow the dog to be available for purchase for $1,500 to Ken if Ken is interested. If not, we can try to sell the dog to another agency for the same price, but there are issues with that because when Ken is no longer with us, we don't have a place to put the dog. And so we then either have to pay to put the dog up while we hold it, and see if somebody is interested in it, which they may not be interested in it, and then we may be down the road, have to find other options to do and stuff. And so the recommendation is to sell the dog to Ken if Ken is interested in that. The other options are we can potentially try to reassign it to another officer. We can attempt to sell the dog to another agency. And then I couldn't see any other options really available.
The best scenario is if Ken will purchase the dog, and the or the agreement that you have in your packet is an agreement for that. And I think he's expressed his willingness to purchase that. Am I correct in that?
He has. There is one, Rob, on one of the provisions in the agreement, if you'd like to talk about that.
What does that mean?
That is that the agreement prohibits him from ever putting the dog back into service or reselling the dog at any time. His position is that he has no intention of putting the dog back into service. He has no intention of reselling it. It's just once he pays fair market value for the animal, he believes it's his animal and he should be told what he can or can't do with the dog. Shane has expressed some concern about liability issues. Ken doesn't seem to feel like those exist, but those are the arguments, unless there's something I missed.
But the agreement defines that, and that's what we are recommending, is that those provisions are in place, so for liability.
But what I'm saying is Officer Etchell would probably not take it then.
He won't take it.
But we could sell it potentially for a little bit more than we were gonna sell it to him for anyway, right? Or is that unlikely?
Yeah, the only thing is we'd probably have to put it in a kennel until then and pay the cost of that. That's the
Or could
thing.
somebody take it? I take it, or?
Or a canine, I don't know.
I don't know if it's a can or they are.
They need to be.
You're more experienced,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they have to have a kennel to be put in. They have to be. You really have to monitor them. They're a hands-on type of an animal. It's not just one you can throw in your backyard and kind of ignore. So. it is
And
a
what's the
little
problem
intense.
with reassigning it?
Well, there's no one that's interested. We have a very young workforce now because we've had a huge turnover. So you have to have the property to have the dog at your home. And many of the young kids are still in apartments or in situations where they don't own the home and are renting and can't have the dog. So that limits the amount of interest we can have in the handlers. This particular animal also, we're trying to break up a habit of, normally you'll never find a dog that goes potty in their own house, but this one does it in the kennel for some reason. And Etchell is an expert handler, so that's why he was assigned this dog to try to break out of that habit. I think he's mostly broken it, but although I try to have Mr. Topham take the dog, he's not willing to take the risk of him not having broken that habit. And
I've already got one. Thanks.
Mrs. Topham likes to show these.
So Shane, do you want to?
Can we talk to, I mean, if he's going, where's he going, Harriman or something?
No, university.
He's, and they don't need another,
Well, no, he's doing a bomb dog, which is a passive dog, and they don't, the problem is that there's a lot of physical strength that has to go with this animal. They're very strong. And you have drug dogs, which are normally passive and easy to handle, and you have the canine, the patrol dogs, which are find and bite dogs, which are take a lot of upper body strength and training, and there's a little liability there, which is what Ocho is. He's a bite dog. And then you have the bomb dogs, which are much more easy to handle. And for Ken, he's he's past those years of wanting to throw dogs over fences and up in attics and so forth.
Okay, so Scott, you've set a value based upon your analysis and straight line depreciation, which this is but Shane, you feel there's a liability question, therefore the language that does not allow the new owner to liquidate it without.
Yeah, I think that since the canine unit was formed, we probably surplus, this is probably about, what, the fourth?
Third or fourth,
that has been surplus. Typically, we have done that when the dogs reach the end of their careers, and we just want them to have an enjoyable retirement. Their handlers take them, and nobody's ever had a problem with the provisions we include, which are the handler has to provide a good home, provide excellent care, provide companionship, can't just put the dog out in the backyard and let it languish. And then, as the chief mentioned, these dogs that are canines, they are trained to do certain things, and so in my little lawyer mind, I'm concerned about things happening after the dog leaves the city's care, and somebody coming back maybe injured in the future and saying, well, somehow the city is liable for the training it got, and should have placed it with a better home that had better supervision, whatever. So I agree that is probably a remote possibility, but it's to my mind, it's still a risk that we deal with in the sale agreement because in the past we have sold these dogs for nominal value because they have reached the end of their career. This is a little bit different, where the dog has a little service life left in him. So this is a little bit different situation, and you can decide what you want to do about it.
Would it be?
I'm not going to be foolish enough to go against the council, because then you basically put us on notice, so.
Would it be difficult if the apparently agreed situation that's not likely to happen did happen? Would it be that hard to then have another resolution to the effect of, okay, we're going to do that so long as we're indemnified, or some other agreement to say, yeah, okay, it's worked all right with this?
But the person who's bid can indemnify us.
Well, or to modify this agreement, then to allow that to happen if we, that's what I'm saying.
I guess I don't quite understand what you're getting at, but I think my question is, if I understood what the chief said, Officer Etchell is mostly concerned about the non-conveyance, non-putting back into law enforcement service aspect of the contract. He thinks the indemnification isn't necessary because the risk is not there. But I thought I heard that, I perceived that he could go along with that as long as we bent on the non-conveyance, non-putting back into service. Is that accurate or not?
Yeah, it is accurate. He is also obviously a certified trainer handler, and he's a boarder and a vendor, and so to him, he's assuming the responsibility isn't just philosophically. He feels like we're dictating to him, although there's a reason we're dictating.
So
Where did
if-
Ocho come from?
What's that?
Where did Ocho come from? Because Officer Etchell's only been with us a short time on this second round. On this second round.
It came from donations that Officer Etchell procured.
Sorry, say that again?
The dog was purchased with donations, private donations, that Officer Etchell secured from people he knew.
So we bought the dog when he wasn't born at some period. I think that's disconnect. Officer Etchell hasn't been here for
Yeah.
5 years,
Who's been
or
here
4.5 years, and his
Yes, he
dog's
has.
4.5. Oh, he has been?
He's been here for 11 years.
Well, he was gone.
He was gone
for a
for
year.
1 year.
And where was the dog that year?
It was probably at the breeders. He interacts with these guys and trains and buys and sells and trades and with these dogs all the time. It's
I have no problem surplusing, but my question still is, Shane, of what usually protects the city in that surplusing of the dog?
Well, from a risk factor, I think the indemnification, if Officer Etchell's willing to go along with that, why then we would leave the indemnification provision in. The other issues are mainly go to my love of animals and wanting to make sure they're cared for the rest of their life after they've done their job for us. He apparently, Officer Etchell, doesn't like the fact that we're saying, even though you're paying market value or close to market value, you can't convey the dog again, you can't put it back into service. If we have the indemnification, I guess those two issues are not as material to me. They're not risk factors to me.
But I don't get that if the indemnification doesn't pass with the dog, how does that help us?
The
He sells it, if we
indemnification-
give him the right to do whatever he wants with the dog, and then he turns around and sells it to
Well, he's
his
going to
cousin, what happens?
he's going to be indemnifying us for whatever Ocho does, no matter.
With like, okay, he's
No.
indemnifying us, what's the backstop? What happens if that dog goes and bites somebody and he gets sued for $30,000 and he has no umbrella policy on his house? They'll come to us, right?
Yeah, well, they may do that as they come to us, why it becomes a more remote claim. But it's just the same issue you have when you contract with anybody. It's their wherewithal, their ability to cover a judgment, so.
Do you feel comfortable if we had an indemnification?
Oh, well, I think that's the risk factor that I focused on. We have, that's what we have gotten in the past and been satisfied with it.
Do we know if he's gonna accept that?
Well, I think that Chief Russo just said that he would accept that if we would take out the non-conveyance, not putting back into service aspects of the contract. That's what I heard anyway.
Yeah.
But we don't have that to vote on that, correct?
You can approve the contract with, but authorize changes.
It's difficult because of the dog. If we don't sell it to him, I can try to sell it to another agency. And in the meantime, the dog sits in the pound.
Are we planning to get another dog?
No.
That's it, we're gonna be down.
We're just going,
Yeah.
well, we still got three,
If I-
which is
Yeah, if I
quite
could,
beautiful
yeah,
size.
if I had another handler, I might, but 3 is probably a good place for us to be. And
So why did we have 4?
Because we could handle, we had that many handlers at one time, but we lost that staff. They went someplace else.
He came in, he was, man,
So we bit off more than we could chew. Just kidding.
everyone okay with the indemnification and taking out the language as far as reconveyance?
Going against council's advice?
No, he said. he-
No, I think that if we
Yeah,
have
with those changes,
indemnification.
no, I was not going against council advice. That's what he said.
You think? Or you
We're okay?
are, sorry. You are okay? You said, I think I'm okay.
No, I'm okay. If a motion is made to approve it, why then whoever makes the motion, we need to clarify that the contract as attached is be approved with the following changes, removing
section 3B. Those are the no conveyance, no putting back into law enforcement service provisions.
I have to include the mayor. You can work that out with the mayor, and then he'll sign it upon.
Yeah, well, something like that, he tells me I can, but it would be with those changes of removal of the section referring to the putting back into service, yeah, whatever that language is. But the identification would stay, which you identify.
Yeah, so we're just removing section 3B of the current contract.
3B?
3B as in boy.
Okay. Everyone okay with that? Anyone object to that?
And so section 5
Stays.
is enough if he conveys it to somebody else.
We can go back against him if we get dragged into something.
Keeping in mind, he is a breeder and a seller. He conveys dogs all the time. Some that have been trained or he got from other departments, or this is not unusual for him.
The point is we're surplusing an item, an asset, so.
I know.
Standard.
Though it's just awful, it's just difficult, because when I take the dog away from him too, it goes to the kennel, and if I can't find a home for it, then that would not be good.
It is slightly different than an inanimate object.
Yeah, so it's challenging, and if you'll take it, with those clarifications and adjustments to the contract, we'll proceed with some, unless you have objection. Okay. All right, move back to item A, proposed budget.
All right.
I'm going to start us off on this one. We delivered the budget to you and had a conversation at the last work session. We just reiterate a few things related to the budget, and Scott's going to go over some of the details just to remind us of some of this.
Everybody, just real quickly, this clock is about 5 minutes slow, so we can try to be out of here a couple minutes before.
Okay, so I just want to emphasize the process that we've been through, and we talked about this last time. We had significant input from our department heads in each department on this budget. And one of the things that we focused on is, one, meeting the needs of what the services we need to provide in the community, but also really taking a look at line items and budget proposals, and every department except for the small departments had reductions that we really looked at and are included in this, which I give a lot of, I express appreciation to the department heads for working with us on that. The other thing, as part of the process that you're aware of, is we had the committees. We had the compensation committee that evaluated that component of the budget. We had the budget committee that evaluated as well, and we have recommendations that have come from those two committees, which really assisted in this process. Scott put in a lot of hard work on the budget, on the formatting of that, on really looking at revenues, the expenses, and a variety of other things. And we feel very good about the process that we've been through, and it's not just been one or two individuals, it's been a collaborative effort, including the council members. So where we're going from here is May 7th, we are going to be bringing before you the tentative budget for your consideration and adoption. Then there'll be the public comment period, and ultimately adoption needs to occur by June 18th. That's when we will bring that to you. The June 18th date, we're going to that point because there are some elements, including where we're at with the valuation and our levy rate that will be provided to us prior to June 18th, but not before the June 18th meeting. June 4th would be the other meeting that we would look at this, but we won't have that information. And we'll also be a little bit further along on our revenue projections to make sure we're in line with things. We'll know where Unified Fire is at on their total amount as well. So there are a few moving parts that we have to move to June 18th, but we'll have that information. We also have information from our benefits from our insurance providers. We actually have good news on that, but it's still a little bit of a moving target, so we'll have all of that prior to the June 18th meeting. So we need your input, especially for this tentative budget for May 7th. That doesn't mean that we can't make changes between May 7th and June 18th. That's still fine, and we will have public comment on this as well that will address that. But I want to make sure you understood that process. The other thing is, in our last meeting, it was discussed that we take the work objectives that the council provided in our retreat in December and evaluate those work objectives with the budget. We have looked at that, and many of the proposals we have, for example, the additional capacity with a planner to address planning needs, and we have a lot of work objectives related to those planning needs. And we talk about the Bonneville Shoreline Trail and the trail work, and also some sustainability elements. We have components of this budget that address many of these work objectives. In addition to that, conducting a storm drain capital facilities study. We're going to be working towards that. One of the things that you need to decide is whether you want, and it's one of our recommendations, is whether we look at adopting a stormwater fee, which will be a process that we'll have to go through, but that's a component of this. But in general, we feel like the budget being proposed and the items that we're proposing, even with additions, address the majority of the work objectives that you provided. A couple of them that it hasn't. For example, the general plan, we did not get the funding from Wasatch Front Regional on that. We can still move forward with another application. We feel like we can do another application and get the funding and get the majority of that funded through Wasatch Front. We just have to delay that a little bit longer. That's one work objective that you'll have to consider if you want to fund the full amount. I would probably recommend not doing that because I still feel we can get that funded through Wasatch Front, and delaying several months is probably worth it to
But there's
save
still
us.
some pieces in that plan we can be working on.
Sure, definitely. And actually there are components of this budget that address that. For example, our housing study. So I want you to know that
An
we
additional planner could go a long way to doing some pre-gen work on it.
Definitely. Additional planner does that. So I feel like this budget aligns very well with the work objectives that you've set for us as well. So the final thing I just want to say is I want to reiterate the importance that I feel of what we do as far as compensation for our employees. As we talked about last time, we have a market study that's come from South Jordan that we participated in. Just looking at that with the 24 of the job descriptions of the 30+ job descriptions, we feel like we are below market. We are proposing to do a market study, getting an independent look at that rather than just having staff do that. The committee talked about staff doing that study. We can. You have to trust us that we were independent enough in looking at this objectively if you do that. But I really feel like moving us with the 3.7% of merit and the 1.9 COLA is important for us this year to get us to that point and then finish out what we need to do market-wise next year as we evaluate these things. So that's my intro to this. And Scott, if you want to go into a few more of the specifics.
Yeah, so focusing on the memo, if you'll go to the third page, which is really the top of the second actual piece of paper, or sorry, the bottom of the actual piece of paper, third piece of paper there.
What piece of paper?
Sorry. The second piece of paper at the bottom underneath where it says transfers out of the general fund there, I'll start there. So I wanted to focus on the transfers. So the recommendation at this point calls for $1,232,000 transferring to capital projects to fund specific public works capital projects that were requested there, and we'll go through those specific projects in a moment. The debt service fund, $1.8 million, which is $125,000 more than the current year. And you can see the different land and buildings, which is this building and the public works land as well. Police vehicles and public works vehicles for the annual amounts that we're on for those various bonds. This last paragraph I do want to focus on. So the overall impact of all of these changes outlined for the general fund above this means that we'll have a use of fund balance of $617,000. And that is roughly in line with other projections that were turned either whiteboard or back to the napkin during the budget process last year.
Well, it was right there at the end of the table.
I couldn't see it, but I heard a lot about it in the recording that I listened to. But the current projected ending fund balance would be about $3,312,000, and that represents 16.7% of the revenues that are included in the proposed budget. And we're required by state statute to hold 5% of the revenues, and so that would be $994,000. And then by our city ordinance, we're required to have an additional 1%, which would mean another $198,000, bringing that to $1,193,000. And then in addition, there's a reserve for compensated absences, which is the PTO and/or vacation that we have on our books. And that is roughly at $485,000 each year. It was $483,000 this last year. It could grow a little bit. It just kind of depends on everybody's usage of their vacation and stuff. But that would leave about $1.6 million available for appropriation at the end of the budget year next year. So roughly, what would that be, 14 months from now, that would be available.
So from
for
that
budget.
first 3.3 million, and I just took this, it's 50.7% of that is reserved through the two items you talked about, the 6% required by ordinance and the PTO reserve.
Yep.
Leaving 49.3% as unreserved and available for appropriation.
Well, when we did that whiteboard analysis, we went through truth and taxation, we understood that we would take taxes above and beyond what we were allocating and put into the fund balance, and this fund balance does not include the funds in the CDRA or the RDA, right?
It does not. This is just general.
Right, so we still have that opportunity fund. But if you took $617,000, which is what we're taking out of the fund balance, and we used 1.6, if you had the exact same budget next year, you would be in good shape. And that was our intent, was to make sure that when we raise taxes, it was for a couple of years.
Yeah.
At minimum.
And the other thing that's not taken into account in this is we always have some level of underexpend. You never spend 100%. So we will have some. This year, I'm projecting maybe $300,000. If it happened again next year, instead of a $617,000 draw, you'd have about a $300,000 draw. You can't budget that, but the reality of what will happen is probably more along the lines.
The auditors
Except
get
for the
under.
fact that if we increase the merit again in COLA because of the market study, that's gonna gobble up that $300,000 we wanted to save.
Well,
But that would change
that
the
would
budget
change
as well.
Next year.
So based on what's in budget, you never spend your budget to 100%. If I gave you $1, or let's say $100.
I know, but I'm just
you know,
saying if
you
you're
can't
looking
do
at the
that.
bottom line.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yes, if you,
Yeah, there's a-
yeah.
That doesn't take, if you have inflation and benefits and compensation increases, that either that. But
Yes.
But with that 1.6, if that 6 was a million, you'd still be within the range we're talking about. When we did this kind of little bit of a long-term, long-range view last year.
And then, I guess to think about it slightly different way, is that if we just decide to spend 2.5 million on roads this year instead of 1.5, or whatever the number is, that number would now be down to 634, right? So while this looks like a big number to have in your reserve, it's not when you think about some of our capital expenditures.
Exactly.
Yeah. And if you,
Even the reserve is available in case of an emergency, but you could easily have an emergency that could take quite a bit of money.
No.
Knock on wood, I'm not gonna say anything
Yeah.
about water.
Yeah.
Well, if you turn the page, the capital improvements listing is right at the top of the next page there. So the capital improvements fund has some money in it as well. And so it's projected to have about $884,000 at the end of the current budget year that we're in. So that would be the beginning balance for next year.
And the ending is the 474.
The what?
Where did that go?
After we transfer some of that out.
Oh, down here, just
we'll
before.
end this year. Or the end
Oh,
of
yeah,
next year
yeah,
with
yeah. Yes. So up here, there's about $1.9 million of items that are being requested from Public Works. You can see the street funding, $1,650,000, and I'm not gonna go over each of the individual projects. The sidewalk type programs, $117,000, and the stormwater funding is just a single project at $200,000. Trails projects, which includes the Bonneville Shoreline Trail project that we voted on, I believe it was the last meeting that we had.
The match.
And then other capital improvements revenues that come in are, or sorry, I missed the Ferguson Canyon Park and Ride. We have a required match of $125,000 on that one. We're not sure the timing, but we need to reserve that in there. And then the revenues are $600,000 from Senate Bill 136, and then $1.5 million coming in on the Bonneville Shoreline Trail. So when you boil all that down, the total expenditures less the revenues, it's a $1,642,000 of, if you will, cost to us when you boil that down. And we're recommending a transfer in from the general fund of $1,232,000. So what that would mean is that we would need to use $410,000 of fund balance of the original $884,000 that would draw that down to $474,000 that would be available in the capital projects fund to other projects and things. One of those that was talked about last week that is listed later in this document is the trail over the canal near Mountain View Park over here.
$25,000 match.
Yeah, $25,000 match there, and that's just something that needs to be considered through that, because that one seemed to have a little bit of traction, plus about $200,000 of contributed funds that would go to that. So it seems like potentially a good thing there.
But sometimes, well, you want to keep a little bit of reserve, so if you need
Yeah.
an adjustment, you don't have to go.
Well, for me, being an enterprise fund guy for decades, when I look at that 400,000, really you add that to our 1.6, and that's in essence really your fund balance.
It is,
Yeah.
because you could easily transfer that back into your general fund. There's no
But-
restrictions.
So that's a plus. So,
Yeah. So, I mean, those are the kind of the big things that I think I would take away from the analysis. Like Tim said, there are some things that we're still looking at, we're refining. We're not seeing big things that we would change at this point in time. There might be some minor things that we'll bring for slight adjustments as we go into the tentative budget on May 7th, but they're not major.
But even among this body, I think there's still a half dozen questions we need to process if you looked at the budget. So.
Yeah, and if anybody has questions or, you know, things that they want to go over.
Just to begin with, I appreciate the transparency and the clearness of the information. I mean, at a glance, this is 1,000 times better than what we've had in the past. No offense to those who've done it in the past, but this, I appreciate going through this because it becomes very clear to me what my questions are and be able to make a decision. So kudos to both you and Tim and the committees for the work they've already done. That's a real plus. I'd like to open up to a few questions. I mean, I have several, but.
Yeah, I had notes through here, or concerns that I had been going through there, so do you want to go first?
I'll just go out, just break the ice, and please add to it. Starting on the revenue side, I think is pretty clear. Starting with the expense side, when we look at the benefits and compensation, the one thing we've talked about is the 1.9 and the 3.7. I've gone back and forth with that. Anybody have any questions with that as recommended by the committee? I went back and forth a little bit when I've looked what several other entities are doing, especially with the UFA and stuff. I'm supportive of that. I think it's important to continue to value our employees and to provide that, and then with some type of a market analysis between now and next year, we can hone in on where we really are, because I'm not sure. But so I'm supportive of that 5.7 in those two ways, and we'll step them in. Where I have the question is that the $50,000 for the market study, as Tim mentioned, really doing that in-house. checked with some other government individuals who were involved in government, and I think there's a feeling that this is something that can be done in-house if it's guided properly. And though it's nice to give it to a consultant and have them do all the research, but I would ask if that's something that possibly can be done in-house, even if it takes a little bit longer through the year.
Was it 50 or was it 30?
It says 50.
It's 50. And that's benchmarked off of some other studies that have been done by other communities recently in the last 2 years. If you want me to answer that, we can do it.
Well, I mean, I'm throwing that out as a question again.
We can do it. We have Paula and Scott and myself that are all capable of getting the work done and doing it as long as you trust that it's independent enough. And we'll do it in a way that that addresses all the issues, because we have enough data from some of the other entities that we could do that. We just felt like having an independent look at that as well as our grade and step structure would be best.
So I'd rather apply that 50,000 back to salary increases and stuff by doing it ourselves.
If you want to do that,
Yeah,
I would like
We
to
can
get
think
Paula
about
and
it too,
Scott.
but that'd be my position.
I was gonna say something totally different, but I'll say it anyhow. But, so that means you're gonna give me and Paula and Tim $50,000?
No, it's
Oh,
not, because I don't want to
Yeah,
justify
well,
that to
divide it
anyone. No, Paula.
I'm totally joking.
Part of that is off. It's, you know, when you go to say, we're revising everybody, we're giving everybody this kind of adjustment, it does look better to say, well, that was not what we decided that it's like voting yourself a raise as opposed to having somebody else saying, you're out of whack and you need the adjustment. That's the.
But I think
Yeah.
too, the requirement is when you bring in the recommendation says this position is 15% below market. You know, I would want to know, okay, where's the data that shows that? And so it's got to be apples to apples, because if you look at just job title, it doesn't tell you much at all. You really need to look at the description clearly, what it is, the knowledge, skills, and abilities of that job. I think we're small enough that we can take those areas and do it. I've been involved in many of them. It does take some time, but I think with the team you have now, I'd much rather take that 50,000 and use it to give it to salaries and benefits and give it to a consultant on that particular topic. That's my personal opinion, but if the council feels differently, that's fine too.
I mean, mine was, that it gets the optics. If you're okay with the optics of having it done in-house, then, I mean, that's fine. You said that you are, I could do that way. I mean, one of the other advantages of having in-house is there's more opportunity for detailed review if someone on the council wants it.
But no, I hear.
Because they work for us.
The optics
Consultants
thing
might
there
not
is that
always
you're-
cough up everything. I mean, you can ask them to, but.
Like UFA just went through it for all of their whole organization. And they did it all in-house.
They have more than one HR, just in my defense.
Well, I agree.
We're gonna get an extra pair of Mr. Trace batteries.
10 times as big too.
I know.
No, and I would assume it
Extra
would not
coffee.
be just you either. It has to be a team approach and taking different jobs, or you come back and say, you know what, we can't do it, and we reevaluate it.
I'm sure we can do it.
But like Tim said too, I think because it's leapfrogging effort, so many jurisdictions have done a lot of this that they'll share. What's that website?
Technic.
Yeah, and some of that's up to date and some of it's not. I realize that.
That's the problem with that
I know,
side, but yeah.
but pieces of it are there that can be used. It's just where all of the municipalities share their job descriptions and their grades and stuff. Through all that, I mean, at a 50,000 cost.
The South Jordan survey was done very well, and it was done by job description. So we could go in and see which of the job descriptions best fit what our job description actually does, and sometimes the titles don't match, but their job description did. I had some that I had to run by matchup because I don't know anything about public
Yeah,
works.
there's certainly, you'll share with
But-
the department heads to say, yeah,
yeah.
this matches, doesn't match it. But I think under Tim's leadership, who can be objective,
Yeah.
I know he can, then he can help. I don't want to spend too much time on that, but You know, we could even leave it in tentative and decide later if you want to think about it more.
Well, I mean, and the part of it is, yeah, in the tentative, and we decide or take input on it. Another possible, I don't know what it, from a work standpoint, is there anything you could do with a temp or a intern type of situation on doing some of the research? Is that worthwhile in any way, shape, or form to pay in-house?
Yeah, it would be
You
helpful.
understand what I'm
Yeah,
asking?
I do.
If there's a college student that could work over the summer researching some of the hardcore stuff,
Yeah.
then maybe the amounts
That-
significantly less, maybe it's 5 or 10,000 for an internship.
If you want to propose that, consider something like that, because you get a sharp intern that's in communication with HR, yeah,
We're on.
So on that, am I hearing the direction to, as we move towards the tentative budget, to pull that out, maybe look at some resources going towards helping us capacity-wise with this? 'Cause if that's the direction
I mean, you don't need the capacity, I guess, what I'm saying is I'm fine with it. You need 3 to go.
Okay.
So you need
Let
one of the
us
other
know,
2 to
give
come
us
up.
direction.
Well, again, we're
I think
talking,
it's-
we're talking about on May 7th as a tentative budget. Even after then, we can still adjust, but I'm just saying that's just my position.
Well, I'd like to see the 50,000 go towards a sustainability coordinator.
Hmm.
But if you can find outside resources, have you shopped it around? Like 50,000 seems like a lot.
Well, no, we have, for a study,
study.
yeah. I'm familiar because there's been some other communities that I've worked with recently that it's roughly that amount. So,
I support the mayor. I think both Councilmember Shelton and I had similar comments, like how could we tier what South Jordan has done to reduce our costs or do it in-house, so I'm supportive of the mayor.
we have that direction then?
Yeah.
That's good.
Oh,
Tentative,
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
In-house with possible, if there's a need for something else.
Okay.
Yeah. Another item is, I know we've taken out 2 interns and funding for a planning tech person. I'm personally supportive of that. I think that's a valuable thing because of our increased workload, and then with the understanding that that percentage of that is for sustainability related things, that we can, again, working with other municipalities, and that's a good step. So that's kind of a win-win for me.
Yeah, and I especially, just to emphasize, and I talked with Mike Johnson a lot about this, we have, with all of the work objectives that we're focusing on, especially with planning needs, trail things, this capacity really will help us move towards those work objectives, so that's all I'll say on that.
Yeah, we're gonna run out of time. But let me throw out a couple more items for discussion. Some of them are kind of clear, and I'll come back.
Isn't this the last thing we have to talk about, or no?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
but we've got.
But there's-
Yeah, there's a couple of these are gonna require some discussion. One thing I think the council needs to be aware of now with fire, okay, we have a placeholder of 5%. UFA has not finalized their budget yet. That's kind of fluctuating from 4.04 to 5.11 because of differences of opinion and thinking as far as where we will end up on salary, benefits and compensation. I'd like some feedback from the council. Because UFA is committed by their own guidelines and agreement that they're trying to put all of their firefighters and paramedics, et cetera, in the top 3 along the Wasatch Front. The question is, we made progress last year. Now this year, we're looking at the budget to be quick, and Mike, correct me if I misstate anything, that one option is to make that final leap, 100% be there for next year, which means our increase for the city would be 5.11%, or we can do it over 2 years, something like that, and our increase would be 4.54%.
Yeah, that's what I said last.
So it's about a $30,000 difference for us, I think, approximately. So,
Do what? Just the whole what, I guess I don't know.
okay, it's all in increase for firefighter salary schedule by all of the sworn firefighters, bringing them up so they're all in the top 3 for the 15 departments along the Wasatch Front. Put in the top 3, which helps them maintain
Top
officers.
3 in salaries.
Top 3 in
benefits.
salary benefits, yeah, it's combined. If I'm saying that right.
And is UFSA saying they're gonna go the full amount?
Well, we've not decided yet. The Benefits and Compensation Committee recommended initially to do it in 2 steps. Majority of it this year, then the final step next year. When it went to the full Finance Committee, another option was thrown out, you know what? Let's get it done this year, it's done, the next year doesn't cost as much. But it's a greater impact to all the different municipalities as far as funding that, because we have to fund our piece of it. And I'll be a voting member on that, so I would like to know your feedback. Originally, I was supporting the budget, the Benefits and Compensation Committee of doing it in 2 steps. A big step this year, then the final little step next year. But some others came back in the full Finance Committee and the full board this morning and said, you know what, maybe we shouldn't just do it. Because some of the cities have had a lot of growth in sales tax, they think they can fund it, and so.
Well, I guess that's not making complete sense to me. The reason I asked about UFSA, because that's 85% of it. What you're talking about really is the
It's
decision
UFA.
by Holiday, Cottonwood Heights, and Elton.
No, we're all part of UFA,
Well,
yeah.
I mean, if they say yes and we kind of say no, then
Then we have to withdraw and go do our own thing. We don't get to this, by our interlocal agreement, we're part of that organization.
All for one, one for all.
Oh, that's, yeah. No, the process is excellent, don't worry. We review, and we brought Chief Peterson in, and we met with Scott and myself, and Tammy, we went through the whole process, and actually, to give you more information on that, there's $2 million that's being refunded to the members from underspending this.
It's a credit.
Year, and so it's lowered some of our costs. So they're very efficient, they're doing an excellent job.
So a psychological boost for the firefighters if we do it all.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That's
you're talking the 30,000 is 30,000 to us.
Yes,
Our-
just our piece of it.
You say 30,000 over 400 employees, just isn't that much.
You're there this morning, yeah.
Yeah, so with that, with the breakdown for Cottonwood Heights, and I know this hasn't been determined if you go with the full amount, but I was still under the assumption that if you did go with the full amount, we would still probably be within our 5% range that we budgeted.
We would, my understanding
Would be more?
would be 5.11%.
Well, for our breakdown though,
Yeah.
isn't it 5.11 overall, but our breakdown is a
No,
little
ours,
bit more.
I'll show you in 2 seconds.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess I'm with Tally, if we're talking about $30,000 boost morale for
Well,
fire services.
and I'm feeling better about it, here's the reason too, why we support that, is because we're gonna go ahead with the 5.7 for ours, even though that would be higher, but it sends a message to, the reason I spoke today in the full board meeting of the challenge is that you can't think of one piece of our operation. You still have public works, you still have police, you still have all these other ones, and so you gotta be careful about creating inequity. But I think if we're doing the 5.7, which is a full recommendation, we're doing the study, I think we're working in the same direction.
I think the tentative should at least be the maximum number, just in case. It's gonna be a lot easier to fix it if they decide to go into steps and alter it accordingly.
Yeah.
I think it's 5.1.
So I just confirmed, talking with Chief Watson, that the proposal that was being sent out, we were the overall UFA increase was 4.54%, but Cottonwood Heights increase based on the 3-year call basis
Right,
would drop down to like 4.05%, something like that.
yes.
And so even though the overall increase to UFA partners would be 5.1 or whatever it would be, ours would probably be less because of the call volume basis it would drop a little bit, and I don't know the exact amount that it
That's
would
what I,
drop.
Maybe.
that's what I understood.
And so I think it would probably still fit in with what we have in our
Still
budget.
within what the
That's
tentative
what I
is.
Yes.
Well, in their budget,
So,
under
And you'll
this
have those
scenario,
answers before it passes the final.
we
It
will.
says it's 5.1. And that's after the service demand evaluation.
And we had 184, 257. And what's the number for 5.11?
185, so it's,
So we're talking about less than like
$1,000.
1,000.
Well, this is a 5%. Since we did this,
Yeah.
it was gonna go down to 4.04. We're down to 4.05. See, it was gonna be.
Yeah, but this says this is a 5% increase.
Right, and that's
That
just
was
the
our,
number we
that was our
plugged in.
placeholder.
Right, that's what I'm saying, the difference is very, it's
Right,
like
and so,
Few thousand
$1,500.
so this is what we were gonna be here.
yeah.
But now we're
Few
here
thousand.
to do the whole thing.
It's not 30,000, it's 1,500.
Well, it's 30 between these two, because this is where we were.
Right, but, yeah.
Yeah, this
But our-
was, this was just an arbitrary thing we put in from the city.
But our placeholder will only
It's
be.
close.
It's
Yeah, so
close,
it's right next to our placeholder, you're right, yeah.
Yeah.
But we were hoping to get below that, but, yeah. So,
That's good.
okay, all right. Okay, chief, that'll make you guys happy,
Thank you very much.
okay?
Making up for past decisions. District 4, but.
So anyway, we want to talk about that because I want your direction. We kind of went back and forth, but that seems to be the direction most cities are going to want to go in.
Well, I guess the point is that we can be supportive of whatever decision they are. It's going to be covered in our tentative budget.
Yeah, yeah. But I want to speak to the consensus of the council. Because Mayor Dally and I were on the ones doing it in 2 steps initially, but we were both seeing some value getting down to be less of an increase next year.
Yes, because once you're close to market, then it's maintenance instead of adjusting to get to market.
Yeah. Okay, the other item of question, and I don't know if we have time tonight to discuss this, and that is.
I want a meeting next week.
No, well, we'll have a chance between the tentative and going through this in 2 weeks, but we can try and do it today, yeah. The $125,000 savings from the elimination of the Gilson Engineering contract. I don't know how the council, I've asked some questions of Tim, and I know Tim will be meeting with Mr. Gilson himself. I don't know when that's happening.
Thursday.
Because
I'm happy to answer any questions related to that. You want me to talk about it?
well, we went through this last year when you were not here. We brought in Mr. Gilson, and there was the challenge that there was more service than was identified in just taking him out. I guess he has additional employees, additional services, relationships. I'm not an engineer, I don't know. So I can leave it up to you guys, but yeah, but I did talk to Brad, he caught me in the hall here because he was out of the country and expressed concerns and things that I could not speak to, other than I referred him to you to have that meeting and suggested that he walk through those with you, and I know you've looked at some of those things.
I think and part of it, like we've discussed, Brad, that I mean, it's not just last year, it's been come up many times. I'm sure a lot of the basic stuff that he does, we probably could do less expensively in-house with an in-house engineer. One of the advantages of having Brad as an outside is things that he's been very, very well versed at Wasatch Front Regional Council. And so things like the Fort Union Highland project, getting funding for some other roads, the congestion mitigation, air quality grants we've got in the millions of dollars, because he is that familiar with that process and he moves through there and he knows them well. We've been able to get those types of things. And those things take 5, 10 years plus sometimes to come to fruition. And that would be, it's possible we find a engineer in-house that knows those systems and can navigate those and keep us moving there. But you do run that, it's kind of a little bit like Greg and Brian, you know. You can certainly get along without the expense, but sometimes you've got to be concerned about what the long-term impact of that is.
Yeah, and that's why I look to people here and say, because the thing that catches my eye, it says it saves $125,000. Again, I've been told by everyone on staff, there would be no loss in service, or no loss of ability to obtain any funds. And that's your analysis. But go ahead.
Well, I'll be brief. It's fairly common practice to have a city engineer that works for the city. I mean, my whole career, that's the way it's been. And we have two parts of the contract that we work with Gilson Engineering right now. One is their contract that they work as the city engineer, which is evaluating plans, checking some of the design elements. And so there is that component that we feel like an in-house city engineer at the city can do all of that work. We feel very comfortable that we're not going to lose any of that capacity right there. But then on top of that, you have the design work, which is another $200,000+ that is still going to be in place with the budget. One of the concerns that we've had though is we have our city engineer that's also doing all of the design work for us and doing their own checking on that design work, which doesn't seem right to us. So one way or another, I think we would do an RFP on that second component and make sure that our city engineer, whoever it is doing the work and checking those that we do design work. That's what we want to implement, bottom line. And so we feel like we will have the capacity to do that. Brad has a lot of institutional memory, I understand that, but we feel like the services that can be provided in-house, we can do what we need to do.
So can you provide an example maybe for me on the Canyon Center? If we had our own city engineer, that person would be going out and verifying that the plans that we're looking at are being met, or would we be hiring a third party there?
Well, that project, you have a structural engineer.
Sure, so we are.
The third party, but like a road project that we're doing, we have a city engineer that's working in conjunction with the design engineer to do that. All the plan reviews that come in, our city engineer would be doing those plan reviews and doing the check on site with those elements. That's what they would be doing.
And then carrying it through so that, like on the Giverny project, we had some maybe issues there with the width and repaving or different things like that. We would be we would have better insight and follow through.
Correct, it would be in-house, yes.
Okay. So that's the rationale. We feel like we can save funding doing that.
And have more control.
And
less communication.
Correct.
Like.
Correct. Correct.
So right now, the budget has that out, right?
The budget shows the $125,000 worth of savings. It's in the budget right now.
And you're meeting with Brad later this week.
Correct.
To give him an opportunity to defend his position and share with you his thoughts on it.
Correct.
My largest concern is making sure, that's one hard thing to do with an unknown. You're going to go hire somebody. But I would probably I would really like to make sure that somebody has some of that vision and has the ability to follow the Wasatch Front where a lot of this funding comes from. Because again, the adaptive traffic control we got excited about a couple of weeks ago, and those things would not happen but for having our city engineer who had the vision and the ingenuity to actually say, this would be a great idea, let's go do it. So more of a, can we go and do this, as opposed to, just sitting at your desk and pushing papers a little bit. I guess that's.
I think
Some of those, because I think, those kinds of things are really good. The $2.2 million in savings is awesome. I think it was worth the pursuit.
Again, I think it's a valid question. It's a change in the culture a little bit. And I think right now, to be the tentative budget, challenged him to have that meeting objectively and because Brad was out of the country and didn't hear about this till he got back and hasn't had an opportunity really to meet. I guess he finally met with you, but he would like to meet with you and just talk about that and go to that point.
Yeah. When the committee recommended that we move in that direction, he was out of the country. We sat down with him immediately when he got back and told him what our proposal was.
Oh, so this will be the second time?
Yeah. Yeah, we've.
Well,
He's aware.
To be honest, he heard about it first from another city because they heard before, according to him. but-
Yeah, I'm not,
You
anyway,
can ask him
maybe,
back
I'm not
later.
sure.
All right.
I haven't been talking to other
I
cities
should
about this.
bring that up, yeah. Okay, so anyway, it's in there. We challenge the city manager to review that with him, make sure that there's something that's not, that he's doing, that we're not aware of, that is a cost we don't get surprised by later. Oh, God. We're out of time.
What do you mean?
We still have time, 5 minutes.
Oh, that clock's
Well,
wrong.
we got-
That
clock is
clock
wrong.
on time.
You have 4 minutes.
4 minutes.
And there's a big crowd in there, by the way, we need to.
The crowd about, what do you think?
I think it's the Brighton.
Brighton.
Oh, right,
yeah,
this
yeah,
way.
swimmers
We should
and
be
all
on
that
time
stuff.
We can come back and finish
We
this.
have to
and-
come back anyway, because we have a closed session with 2 items, so. Let's finish this. This is critical, this is, the budget is
Well,
one of
this,
those
yeah, this
major
is the big one.
responsibilities.
This is
yeah.
worth coming back to.
Well, last year, we were here till like, what, 2 in the morning for weeks and weeks. so.
Well, I
We want
appreciate
different colors on the whiteboard.
everybody's.
But we have
committed.
been, yes, we
Yeah,
have
we've
been
working.
spending time
Yeah.
just outside.
Okay. Motion to adjourn to our business meeting.
We adjourned to the business meeting.
Moving second, all in favor, say aye.